Hi, everybody. My name is Heidi Platt. I am a therapist in Oregon, Brookings, Oregon, actually. I've been working for the last year and a half as a mental health crisis therapist for Curry Community Health. And yesterday was actually my last day doing that job. And from here on, I'm going to be carrying my own caseload, and I'm working towards licensure. So I want to talk today a little bit about trauma and healing from trauma. From the youngest age that I can remember, about 3 years old, I was racked with chronic anxiety. Being in my body was really uncomfortable. Being in the moment was really uncomfortable. And I didn't know how to deal with it. So basically, I spent most of my time wishing that I wasn't in the moment that I was in and wishing that I was on to the next moment. In my head, I was going to feel more comfortable later than I was right now. And I lived most of my life that way. So when I was about 12 years old, my dad gave me some blackberry brandy in a jelly glass, about 2 inches in a jelly glass. And I drank that blackberry brandy. I sipped at it, and I felt this warmth come over me that just kind of spread from my toes up over the top of my head. And my brain went, this is the answer. This is the answer. And I couldn't wait until I was able to have that feeling again. I didn't drink at all, really. My dad would occasionally give me a little bit of wine. When I was about 17 years old, I remember having a beer after a football game, and that was pretty special. And then when I was 18 years old, I started drinking with friends at parties, and I drank to excess right out the gate, pretty much right out the gate. And I really just all the time couldn't wait until I could have my next drink. And when I was 19 years old, it started getting really bad. When I was 20 years old, it got worse. And I had my first really serious suicide attempt, because what would happen for me was that feeling of anxiety would lift, but then I would fall into a really bad depression. So I would become suicidally depressed. I would drink to die. So I had my first really serious suicide attempt. I slit both my wrists, and I took a bottle of sleeping pills, and I ended up in the hospital, and they were drawing blood gases on me, and people were coming to say goodbye, and it was bad. But I didn't want to stop drinking. That was my answer. So I didn't want to stop drinking. I didn't get sober for the first time until I was 23 years old. And I went to a 12-step program, and I got sober. And I stayed sober for about 2.5 years. And then I thought that I had made it. I hadn't been willing to do any deep dive work on myself. I hadn't been willing to, I would do 1, 2, and 3. And then the 4-step seemed just too daunting and too uncomfortable for me. So I wasn't willing to take it. And I ended up drinking again. I drank again when my son was 11 months old, and I kept it a secret until I couldn't anymore. And I got pregnant with my second son, and I drank through most of that pregnancy until I was about 7 months pregnant. And then I decided that I was going to stop drinking, because I realized that if I was drunk when I went into labor, they might take the baby, and I didn't want that to happen. So selfishly, I stopped drinking. Maybe unselfishly, I don't know. I got sober again when that son was 19 months old. I stayed sober until he was, for 4.5 years until my kids were, 6 and 7 and 5. And then I gave myself permission to drink again. I was stressed out. That was my reason. And drank again. I got sober again 9.5 years ago. And this is what happened. While I was at my rehab, I found yoga. And for the first time, without the help of drinking or drugs, and I had had a lot of drugs and a lot of drinking, I was able to be in my body and be comfortable. And that was a revelation for me. So for the first time, just in the middle of a pose, my head would slow down enough to be in that moment and be present. And I realized that that was going to be my new answer, was to do yoga and to practice meditation and to be mindful and to be present, which had always been really, really uncomfortable. Another thing about it is that I was finally willing to do really, really, really deep dive work into myself through therapy, through step work with a sponsor, through meditation and mindfulness. And I realized that I could be meditative in doing a lot of things. I could be meditative doing my quilting. I could be meditative doing my long walks that I do. I could be meditative speaking to someone else and just being slow down enough to just listen. That was a meditative piece for me. And it was a revelation. It was a real revelation for me. So that's what's been happening for the last 9.5 years, is that it's been a process for me. I do guided meditation at least 15 minutes every day. I do yoga at least 5 times a week. And for those times that I'm able to be present, I am not uncomfortable in my own body. The other things that's happened in the last 9.5 years is that and before that actually, is that I've realized that I had really deep trauma from my childhood. I was molested from a really young age until I was about 9.5 years old. And the only reason that molest stopped is because I started projectile vomiting all over him, and he left me alone. And I realized that sometimes our bodies find solutions that our mind can't, because what would happen is in between each molest, I would forget. And so my body took care of it. I also am a rape survivor. And at the age of 16, I developed a really serious eating disorder and ended up being hospitalized because my digestive system just broke down. It wouldn't work anymore. And I had a doctor come to me at that time, at that hospitalization, and he said, Heidi, you don't have to carry the whole world on your shoulders. And that was exactly what I was feeling. I was feeling like I had to literally carry the whole world on my shoulders. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to compartmentalize. I didn't know how to distract. I didn't know how to be present. I had no idea how to do that. So he gave me permission to kind of start to work on the eating disorders little by slowly. And I was able to do that. But at the same time, there weren't programs for people in 1979 that could allow you to start to work on yourself. They were just starting to realize what anorexia nervosa was. There weren't really specialists in it, and I had good people in my court, and I had people that I could talk to, but I there wasn't really a really focused place where I could go to start to work on that. And that was hard. So so I just kind of gave myself permission to start eating in kind of really ritualized ways, which unfortunately have transferred into my adulthood. So I've relapsed into my anorexia nervosa in my adulthood, and the reason I only had 9.5 years sober is because what would happen is I would stop eating, and then I start drinking and using again. And besides alcohol, I also used opiates and benzodiazepines, and in fact was kicking benzodiazepines when I went into treatment this last time. So so I was only able to do yoga after I kicked benzodiazepines because I couldn't even stay focused long enough to do that, to even be present for any kind of practice. So what would happen is I would stop eating, and then I would start using, or I would start using and I'd stop eating. They're really linked. So I did a paper when I was just in my first few years of schooling. And that paper was on the direct correlation between eating disorders and addiction. And I found a lot of papers that supported that paper. I was able to find a lot that, and then what I found was that 50% of people with eating disorders also have addiction issues, and 50% of people that have their primary diagnosis of substance use disorder also have eating disorders of some kind, either bulimia or anorexia nervosa or overeating. So, so with that support, kind of through moving through my schooling, I was able to realize that I was a very traumatized person, and that was the reason why I had this anxiety, was the reason why I had a lot of my addiction issues, was the reason that I also had the eating disorders, addictions, and the anxiety disorder. And that was amazing for me to find out, because this was something that I always thought that I was broken, that the reason that I had the anxiety was because I was broken. The reason why I had the eating disorders was because I was broken. And the reason that I have substance use disorders are because I was broken. And so what I get to do today is I get to reflect back to people that I work with that what happens is if you have trauma, especially in childhood, and then you add in genes that have a propensity to that you're going to be having some kind of substance use disorder because you had it in your family. That accounts for about 50%. And then when you have trauma in your childhood, that flips on the switch. And I learned this by studying a lot of the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, and you can look him up. He wrote this really amazing book called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And when I read that book, that was another aha moment for me, because he explains the disease of addiction so well in that book. And I remember one of the stories that he tells in there of, he goes down to Vancouver's Lower East Side, which is kind of a slum ghetto area there. And he goes there and he is interviewing this young man who is addicted to heroin, and he asked him about the first time he used, and he said it was like a warm hug. And I got that. To me, when that first time that I drank that blackberry brandy, it was like a warm hug. And it wasn't that I wasn't receiving warm hugs from outside of myself, but I wasn't receiving, like, I had zero self-love. I loathed myself because I thought that for some reason I was the one who brought on the molest. I was the one who brought on the substance use disorders, and I was the one who brought on the eating disorders. I was broken. And that realization that that was the reason why alcohol first, and then opiates, and then benzodiazepines, and sometimes all three, became the answer for me, was because I wasn't willing to give myself those warm hugs. Even though I was surrounding myself with people that were providing those warm hugs, I loathed myself. So in the last 9.5 years, I've really started to learn how to practice self-love by feeding myself right, by making sure that things that build the dopamine and serotonin in my brain, like the long walks that I take every day, the yoga that I do 5 times a week, the checking in with other people in recovery that I do on a daily basis, whether it's through meetings or on the phone or in person, that I am really building myself up and giving myself reasons to love myself. It's also in the work that I do. I love what I do for a living. I get to be part of the solution, real solution, instead of, maladaptive behaviors that I used in my past. But at the same time, I also get completely why my clients use some of the maladaptive behaviors that they do, because I did for a really, really long time. And I get to reflect back to them that they're doing the best that they can. And the other thing, that I try to give them is to ask the question, instead of what's wrong with you, what happened to you? Because some of my clients have never been asked that question. It's all about what's wrong with them. It's all about their diagnosis, whatever it is. It's never about what happened to you. I like to ask my clients about the first time that they drank and used, if that's one of their coping mechanisms. Because we never ask people about that, the first time that they used. There's a really good documentary called The First Day. And it was done by someone named Chris Herron. And I get to work today for the Herron Project. I get to facilitate groups for people, families of people that have someone in their family that is struggling with their substance use disorder, and I get to support them. But Chris Herron did this documentary called The First Day, and if you get a chance to watch it, it's one of the 30 for 30 documentaries, and he goes into high schools, and he asks these kids about the first time that they used, and he offers them different solutions other than alcohol and drugs for them. And he's not asking them to self-disclose that they don't want to, but he's asking them to think. And I was never asked that question. Why did you use the first time that you used? Why was that the answer for you the first time that you took a drink of blackberry brandy? And the truth of the matter is that I was asked to keep someone else's secrets from a really young age, and I didn't know that I could tell. And if I had known that, and my parents didn't know. My parents didn't know to ask. you know? That's the other thing is, so today when I work with people and I ask them, what happened to you? Many times they're shocked because they've never been asked that question. And usually the next response is tears because they get to finally tell. So a lot of my growth around healing from my own trauma has been through my education, by doing work in trauma work, and looking at studies for trauma and what happens and how people heal, how different people heal from trauma, has been really educational for me because it's been giving me a lot of permission in the last 9.5 years to heal myself and to seek my own therapy and to take care of myself in these ways. I remember talking to one of my classmates. This is when I was just going for I was just going to go for my certificate in addiction studies. And I was working on that certification, and one of my classmates said, I don't meditate. I don't know how, I can't sit still. And so I asked a question, not even knowing that this was going to be a good tool for me to use later. What gets you in the zone? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, what gets you in the zone? Like, is it a piece of music or a place? And he said, oh, jazz, listening to a piece of jazz music will get me in the zone. And I said, that's meditation. What else? And he said, going to the ocean. Man, I can sit on the beach over in Half Moon Bay and I can sit there and just zone out for hours. That's meditation. And he was like, oh. Because then I asked him the question, are you able to be present? Yeah, man, I'm just there. I'm not doing anything else. My head's just there. I'm not even hardly thinking of anything else. That's meditation. And so that kind of allowed me to kind of reframe what I think of as meditative behavior. I can be in my kitchen like I was this morning, baking something. I was making this awesome coconut pound cake, and I was able to just be in the zone, just reading the recipe, adding the ingredients, in the zone, not needing to do anything else, not needing to be anywhere else, not needing to be in the next moment like I always needed to be when I was a little kid, just being willing to be there now. And so schooling has helped me to do that. So now I have a master's in addiction studies. I'm working as a therapist, and I've been re-traumatized by doing crisis work for the last 1.5 years. And because it's just trauma, it's just crisis every day, all day long. And that's been really hard. So I gave myself permission to ask to just move over to carrying my own caseload, which is not to say that I'm not going to be re-traumatized, but maybe it'll be easier for me to compartmentalize my own stuff. I have done that. I've been willing and able to do that. But I've also become just kind of calloused, and I don't want to be that way in my work. I want to be able to be present again and not, and to have empathy and compassion, and not to want to not be there when I'm hearing someone else's story, because we are our stories, and I value every story. Somebody asked in a group the other day, how I'm able to remember their names, everybody's names. And I said, because I remember your stories. And when I remember your stories, I remember your name, because we are our stories. And she was like, oh, I love stories. I love people. I love who you are. And I love listening to you. So I've been able to do that on a daily basis for a really long time, either through sponsorship or friendship or kinship with family, or through my work. And I feel really valued by that. The other thing is that I really love the people that I work with. And I just kind of want to give a shout out now to the people that I'm going to work out with at Freedom Health Healthcare, because you guys are part of my family. I spend 8 hours a day with you. I value you and I love you. And you've given me a place to land that's been really, really um, kind of holding me, giving me that warm hug. And I get that at work as well as at home. And I also want to thank my family for kind of really giving me that value that I needed all my life. My family of origin, as well as the family that I've created with Ben and Zach and Dylan, and you guys have given me that hug back. You've been willing to let me be in the process of coming to love myself. My kids told me that they always knew that I loved them, even in my addiction. But they realized, especially my younger son told me this one time, that they just didn't know. He just didn't know why I couldn't stop using. And I told him I couldn't stop using for him because I couldn't love myself. And that was probably the most honest thing that I'd said in years when I said that to him when he was 16 years old. And today I love myself. So I get to put down the substances. I have put down the substances, and I have found other ways to give myself that warm hug. And I'm really grateful for that. And so I get to love other people better. I get to love my friends better. I get to love my family better. And I've really been able to forgive my family of origin for not knowing. They didn't know. And as soon as they knew better, they did better. And I'm really grateful for that. I love my folks. I love my family. I love my cousins. I've really built this community of people that I love and that love me back. And I'm really grateful for that. I hope that I'm able to do that for the people that I work with every day, because healing from trauma is my passion. Healing from trauma, I believe, is my life work. And that's all that I want to do from now until forever, whether I'm doing it in a work setting or if I'm doing it helping someone to heal from their trauma through friendship or kinship or sponsorship. That's what I want to do pretty much for the rest of my life. And also helping my kids heal from the trauma that I caused when I was using when they were growing up, because I realized that that's what I have to do. It has to be a living amends for me to be there for my kids. And so that's what I've chosen to do. And I'm grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Lisa, for letting me be a part of the She Is Me conference. I am dedicated to this work. I'm dedicated to helping other women, and I'm dedicated to being able to be there to do the next right thing so that I can show up, not just in my own life, but in the lives of other women, in the lives of other people. I have very dear friends here that hopefully get to see this, and I love you. I love you very much, and I'm so pleased to be able to be asked to be a part of this, because I wouldn't have been able to show up 9.5 years ago, and today I get to show up not only for my life but for the lives of others. So I really appreciate it.